Millions of working immigrants who file taxes are unable to access tax credits and other cash payments because they're ineligible for a Social Security number, leading to health and economic inequities. And actually, that's the purpose of our year-long Equity Can't Wait series, generously sponsored by Marilyn Meyerhoff and Sam Feldman, to explore equity, why it can't wait, and what a truly equitable society would and should look like. Before I introduce our first speaker, please note that there's a Q&A feature here on Zoom at the bottom of your screen that you can submit your questions to. We'll try our very best to answer as many as we can. Now I'm happy to introduce Dr. Phineas Baxendale, the Senior Analyst and Advocacy Director of the Mass Budget and Policy Center. Welcome, Phineas.
Thank you, Sarah, and I'm glad to be here. I'm at Mass Budget, which is a think tank that produces analysis seeking to improve policy in Massachusetts with a particular focus on improving the lives of improving the lives for low and middle income people here in the Commonwealth. And today, Mass Budget has released a new report entitled Ending the Tax Penalty Against Working Immigrants. Many immigrants, often the frontline workers who have most helped everyone else get through the pandemic, remain excluded from essential public supports that that are meant for moderate income working families. Immigrants are required to pay the same taxes that other citizens do, though they're often excluded from the benefits of paying those taxes. If an immigrant isn't eligible for a Social Security number, they can pay with a income tax identification number, or ITIN, you'll hear referred to in this conversation today. Now, for citizens, when they pay their income taxes, they may be eligible for earned income tax credits, which support working families as a refundable credit. And as a refundable credit, what that means is that if the recipient of the earned income tax credit has little or no taxes, they receive a check back for the difference. And close to 400,000 tax filers and their families receive this credit, this earned income tax credit in Massachusetts. It's a credit that is administered federally and matched in Massachusetts in part. It increases generally by family size and as someone works more, and then as people earn additional amounts, it phases out, completely phasing out by about $57,000 for the largest family types. Now, I said it's a federal program, but Massachusetts provides its own state earned income tax credit, helping families to make ends meet by matching 30% of the federal amount. The maximum state credit last year ranged from about $160 for a single filer to about $2,000 for a filer with 3 or more qualifying children. And that amount makes a big difference for a modest income family. Most families who use the credit may report that they pay off debt or make deferred repairs to their home or vehicle, or simply supplement their regular earnings to meet basic needs. The earned income tax credit has been shown to have a really profound effect in research for families, and in a way that goes beyond just the dollars. Comparing earned income tax credit recipients to similar children, those kids in families that receive the EITC tend to be born with healthier birth weights, for instance, and are more likely to graduate high school and attend college. It's a real serious problem that the federal EITC excludes people who file taxes without a Social Security number. And because Massachusetts's EITC is pegged to that federal amount, it means that the Commonwealth also excludes these families. And that includes mixed status families. That is, if anyone in a family lacks a Social Security number, the whole family is denied the EITC, no matter how long they've been working in Massachusetts, contributing to the economy, and paying taxes. It doesn't have to be this way. In fact, in 5 other states have recently fixed this problem by making ITIN filers also eligible for the EITC by extending the tax credit to those who file with the individual tax number instead of the Social Security number. We're going to hear later from Callie Shumitz in Maryland, which is the most recent state following California, Colorado, Washington, and New Mexico in taking this move. Massachusetts sets its own eligibility rule and could follow these other states. In fact, if the Commonwealth extended the EITC, it's estimated that over 13,000 households are likely to benefit from the credit. For the Massachusetts state budget, the cost of that means it would be about a little over $9 million. Not from the scale of our roughly $50 billion budget, not a lot of money, but huge difference for those working families. I'll just lastly note that polling suggests that this policy change would also be popular. According to Mass Inc., their polling group, they released a poll earlier this year that showed that 70% of Massachusetts voters support extending emergency benefits without regard to immigration status, and included 51% of Republican voters. Now, this poll wasn't exactly on the ITIN EITC question, but that means it also wasn't asking people specifically about working immigrants who are already filing their taxes. So arguably, if it had been asking about people who are filing their taxes and already working to contribute the economy, the polling numbers would have been even more overwhelming in their support. So we've got a great panel here. I don't want to take too much of your time. Just in sum, extending the earned income tax credit to tax filers without a Social Security number would provide very meaningful benefits that other states have done, and Massachusetts could do that as well. I'm going to hand over now to Richard Sheward, who leads the efforts of the Healthy Families EITC Coalition, which has been working on these issues for a long time. Hand it over to you, Richard. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Phineas, for setting the stage and setting the context for today's discussion. And for attendees in the chat, you can find the link to this new report that was just released today by Mass Budget on the topic, and is available in multiple languages as well. I also want to thank Sterling for welcoming us here to the latest edition of our Equity Can't Wait series. We have a great panel lined up for today's discussion. I'll moderate the discussion, and then we'll have some time for audience attendee question and answer. So please feel free to type any questions you have in the Q&A box. We'll answer those to the best extent that we can. And we want to make sure that your questions are answered. So who do we have with us today? So Phineas will stick around to answer questions and be part of the discussion. We also have, as Phineas mentioned, Callie Shumitz, who's the Director of Communications and Partner Engagement at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We are joined by Margalit Tepper, who's the Integration Projects Lead at Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Center, also known as MIRA. We have Luz Arevalo, Senior Attorney at Greater Boston Legal Services, and Natalicia Tracy, Executive Director at the Brazilian Workers Center. A whole lineup of great experts here, but what I'd like to do before we jump into the Q&A is to share a story from a real expert, a young mother, a young working mother here in Boston who has recorded a video of her story, how this policy would impact her life. So I'm going to share this short video, and then we'll get,
Hi, my name is Erika. I am blessed to be the mother of Gabriela. She is a very social, outgoing girl and has been hanging out with her friends since she's been a 1-year-old. And now her friends they have their own beds and she wants them to come for a sleepover. But I'm using COVID as an excuse right now to tell her, oh no, after COVID is over. But the reality is that I only live in one apartment in Boston. I'm sorry, in one bedroom in Boston. I can only afford that. And in that bedroom, I also have to interpret sometimes. So I have a desk. I cannot even fit her bed in our bedroom, much less to have a sleepover in her own bedroom. I cannot afford for my daughter to have one bedroom. So right now I am sharing this because I understand there is the earned income tax credit who is helping working parents like me. I worked all year last year. I made about $30,000, and if I would have a social security number, I would get this extra $750, which will help me to pay for after school program. Because of my work, I have to go everywhere to provide translation and interpretation. So I need somebody to watch for my kid. Or also now the summer is coming. I need to figure out how to sign her up for a summer program or summer camp. So I would really use this money that can help me. But as I said, unfortunately, I only have a 19 number, even though I'm paying taxes and I worked so hard all year round, and I had to pay for somebody to help my kid, to watch my kid while I do my work.
All right, thanks everyone for your patience with our audio video issues. I want to thank Erica for sharing her story. So again, just to reiterate, folks who are filing their taxes with an I-10 number are not eligible to receive the EITC, and their children are not eligible to receive the EITC as either. The good news is that in the past 12 months, 5 states have passed legislation to expand the eligibility of their state version of the EITC to I-10 filers. Those states are California, Colorado, Maryland, New Mexico, and Washington State. So this is really marking a response amidst a pandemic that millions of immigrant households have been left out of relief, economic relief, and states are stepping up to the plate. And there's a real opportunity for Massachusetts to learn from these other states, which is why I'm so thrilled that we have Callie here to join us. I'd love to start the Q&A with asking you, Callie, what can you share about the experience in Maryland that can inform folks in other states, especially in Massachusetts, how this policy could be passed?
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to share about what happens in Maryland this legislative session. So kind of leading up to our Maryland's legislative session this year, Colorado and California had expanded their earned income tax credits to include immigrant taxpayers. And we've been having a lot of conversations. You know, we have large immigrant communities in Maryland throughout the state. And in particular, it varies year to year, but 80,000 to 100,000 households per year are paying their taxes using an individual taxpayer identification number. And so that's a large number of people who, as you were just saying, have been left out of all of the other federal COVID relief efforts. Whether that's, you know, unemployment or receiving stimulus checks or, you know, being eligible for food assistance and things like that. So we've been having a lot of conversations with policymakers at the state level and at the local level about potential using the earned income tax credit as a tool for getting more money to low-income households, and in particular expanding the earned income tax credit to people immigrants who pay taxes with an I-10 just because that was a group that had been particularly impacted both by the health and economic impacts of the pandemic, and not been included in the relief. You know, people were facing the threat of eviction, not being able to afford enough food, things like that. So when our governor, you know, Maryland is in a similar political situation to Massachusetts. We have a Republican governor and a Democrat majority legislature. Our governor was using the EITC as a mechanism for eligibility criteria for sending, he proposed sending relief checks to households as part of his pandemic relief proposal. We met with some of the governor's staff, emphasized that this, and in, you know, communications with the public and with our partner organizations around the state, this would still leave out these you know, tens of thousands of immigrant taxpayers who aren't eligible for the EITC because of these discriminatory federal rules. When the legislature started working on the bill, they decided to go even further. They decided to increase the value of our earned income tax credit up to matching 40% of the federal credit. So that's, as Phineas was explaining earlier, that's 40% refundable. So even if it goes, people get money back, even if the credit is more than what they owed in taxes. So that would make our state EITC the most generous in the country. But again, they were still just for people who are currently eligible for the EITC. So we worked in partnership with, we have a large immigrant rights advocacy group, CASA, who was really organizing their members and their supporters to really share stories like Erica's that we just heard, about how people are really struggling to make ends meet. They're working hard, they're paying taxes, and they should be, you know, everyone should be eligible for these tax credits that are available to other working families. So in combination with having, you know, the policy or experts and the data experts like my organization, and, you know, the immigrant community speaking up and saying, not accepting continuing to be left out of relief efforts, we were able to very quickly get the legislature to introduce a bill to expand the earned income tax credit to people who use an I-10 to pay taxes. So it is now law, was passed as emergency legislation, and people are already getting it as part of filing their 2020 tax returns. So, it's temporary for now, and it goes for 3 years, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's hopefully something that we can make permanent in the future.
Great, thanks for sharing that account. It sounds like bringing together immigrant advocacy groups and policy experts was a good combination. And I understand that it's temporary. Was that part of sort of a legislative strategy, or maybe you could tell us a little bit about the thinking or reasoning behind that?
Sure. Obviously, you know, from a policy perspective, we think it should be permanent. You know, the same reasons that all taxpayers should be eligible apply in the future as well. But I think because it was passed as part of the COVID relief package, both of the EITC expansions, both increasing the value of the credit and expanding who is eligible, were temporary measures. In part, that's because of the cost associated with it, you know, not knowing what the budget is going to look like a couple of years down the line. Legislators were more comfortable with the cost elements with a temporary measure.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. Was there any sort of counter argument or pushback among members of the legislature or even the governor?
So the governor largely chose to stay out of it. He did not end up signing the bill, but in Maryland, if the governor does not veto the bill, it can still become law without his signature. There were, so it did pass slightly bipartisan. There's one Republican senator who represents an area that has a lot of agriculture and also seafood industry. So there are a lot of immigrants in her district that she was concerned about making sure that they're able to make ends meet. But we did hear a lot of other Republicans in the legislature who are trying to really frame this as taking money from hardworking Marylanders and giving it to undocumented immigrants. I would say they often some of them used more offensive language than that I choose not to repeat. Our main message was focused on fairness. These are immigrant taxpayers should be eligible for the same tax credit as everyone else. And we also did some education within the legislature about the realities of immigration law. Our immigration system is complicated. Having an ITIN is not synonymous with being undocumented or having any particular kind of immigration status. There are a variety of reasons behind it. And again, just really focusing on the personal stories and the fact that we're talking about Maryland taxpayers who are working hard, paying their taxes, and just trying to pay rent and keep food on the table. And there's no reason we should be essentially taxing them further into poverty. People who are eligible for the EITC are really getting by on very low incomes.
That is true. We've got some good questions in the chat, and we'll sort of circle back on those. I'm going to jump to Margalit. So as a leading, coalition-based organization in Massachusetts focused on immigrant rights and immigrant issues, tell me how you and your members and colleagues are seeing this issue here in the Commonwealth, and what do you see as opportunities?
Great, thank you, Richard, and thank you for having us today. So for those folks who don't know, I'm Margalit Tepper, and I'm from the MIRA Coalition, which stands for the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. We are a coalition of about 130 plus organizational members, including Brazilian Worker Center, including some people I see attending, so it's great to have you here. And we really work both with lawmakers and the communities to try to affect the change we want to see and push the legislation that we have prioritized. I think we joined on to this this coalition and this work specifically because of this focus to that there was pushing legislation to make earned income tax credits expanded for a number of populations, but certainly we were interested in this population, for this population, because this was, I would say that, in the past, MIRA Coalition, because we represent, we really try to be the voice for all foreign-born people in Massachusetts. Sometimes in the past, it's been hard to always just line up with ITIN holders. We know that ITIN holders tend to be more established members of the communities. We don't want there to ever be divides. But, because of the impacts of COVID, and then in attending a number of, with our national partners and national conferences, we really began hearing this kind of repeated recommendation, certainly from partners in states like Maryland and in California, that, there wasn't things, at the federal level that were being done to help and protect immigrant families. And we really needed to really prioritize, would be kind of the recommendation was, you really need to work in your states to prioritize initiatives and legislation that will give any immigrants and their families chances to benefit from a system that they pay into. And so that's kind of when it became clear that we absolutely did want to support this work. Certainly, ITINs contribute about $185 million per year in state and local taxes in Massachusetts. We know that there was so much that at the federal level they were left out of whether it was unemployment, and then here last year in Massachusetts, even trying to think if we could come up with a way to get, some kind of money for folks who were left out of stimulus. So that, was unfortunate that we couldn't do this. So we really do feel we need to push hard. I will say that we're our spirits are a little bit buoyed lately by some of the budget advocacy we've done. We're really proud of a new line item in the budget that's going to have $5 million in state funds for cash assistance that's distributed through community foundations partnered with grassroots organizations, and then there's a 1-1 match from philanthropic sources. And this is a way to get some very much needed cash assistance to impacted communities. The grassroots organizations are located in our gateway cities. They assist a whole range of populations, including LEP, but this is another way that we want to get families, anything that we possibly can. So we really just feel that it's time, and we need to be doing all we can to be helping immigrant families get something, for what they put in.
Great, thanks, Margalit. I'll move to Luz. So Luz, you work on policy issues, but also directly with clients at Greater Boston Legal Services. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing with your clients or the context that COVID-19 has had on the families that come to GBLS.
Thanks so much, Richard. Yes, so I've been in charge of a low-income taxpayer clinic here at Greater Boston Legal Services. This is my 20th anniversary. I've been doing this for some time. And it's been such a privilege to get to know clients, pretty much like Erica, and to see that they, especially during COVID, they were at the forefront. These are folks, I'll give you a couple of examples. I had a client living in Somerville. She had to take a nighttime job. She had to quit her day job, take a nighttime job working, packing at Amazon, so that she could be home during the day, so the kids could, she could assist the kids in their school during Zoom. And that was the only way that she could be available during the day. And she could not just give up the job because, as you know, folks who have ITINs do not qualify for unemployment. I had another client working at a bakery. She worked straight through. Her arm got tangled up in one of the mixing machines at the bakery, and again, a young mother, she had to care for her kid, and she's doing much better, but that meant no income for the time that she was out of work, and the large questions about, always with my undocumented clients, is she going to qualify for workers' compensation? So having a credit, having this extra money can make a huge difference. This year, it's been like the best of times and the worst of times. Here I am telling clients, you're going to get a little bit of a stimulus payment. You're going to get your refund, which is a little higher this year if we can do a look back provision, etc. And except when it comes to my undocumented clients, where I have to tell them, unfortunately, you don't qualify for any of that. Now, here's the thing. The only reason Massachusetts doesn't have EITC available to ITIN workers, it was not really by design. We were just efficient. Back in the 90s, when we implemented this law, when we adopted the earned income credit at the state level, we simply adopted the same federal rule, not realizing that our Massachusetts residents who work with ITINs would pay the same tax, same sales tax, same income tax, and it's almost by accident that they were left out. And when we talk about these folks being able to receive this money. We're not saying give them something extra. No, no. What we're saying is bring them up to the level of everybody else who already receives that merely because they are Massachusetts residents. At the federal level, it breaks my heart when I have to explain to a client, well, here you have your earnings, and even though you don't have a social security number, you still have to pay social security. And you have to do it not because of you or your status, but because it's the nature of the income. You have earnings, and these are subject to social security. Well, at the same time, I'm telling her, but by this, but you do not qualify for this earned income credit, and it's because what else? It's because you don't have that social security number. It's just not fair. I I'd like to make this final point, and it's about compliance in Massachusetts. When, as you know, by and large, we rely on voluntary compliance when it comes to paying taxes. And that's because we just don't have the resources to audit everybody. And so when you have a system that doesn't treat everybody equitably, you engender sort of a distrust in that type of system. It doesn't, because it doesn't have that integrity that we want the system to show. We want the system to be fair. And right now, as implemented, our system is not fair. And I assure you, the folks who want to comply, my clients, absolutely, they want to comply. But they also want to hear that the system is fair. And having a fair system will engender that type of compliance that would benefit all of us as a society.
You're absolutely right, Luz. This really is an issue of equity and fairness, and just having trust in the system that we're all paying into, including I-10 filers. Not Alicia, as the ED of the Brazilian Worker Center, you know a little bit about advocating for fairness. You and your organization were instrumental in getting the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights passed. Any lessons learned from that experience, or anything that you want to share, on behalf of the clients that you serve?
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. Since April 2020, the past 13 months in continuing, the Brazilian Workers Center have done our best to repurpose actually our organization resources on a temporary basis to support our community, which has been badly impacted by COVID. We have been actually operating a weekly food pantry and giving food over this period to over 23,000 families, which most of them, or 30%, were children. It has given us opportunity to see the faces, to hear the stories, and to feel the emotion of those on the line with the children trying to put food on the table. Working with many of them, working often, in domestic work, commercial building, cleaning, landscaping, restaurant work, they became unemployed very early during the pandemic's onset in the spring 2020. And they were not eligible for stimulus checks or any unemployment insurance. Many were also worried about violating immigration rules on public charge, so they stayed away from government agency offering any type of assistance that maybe the children could have benefit from. So many were desperate for and could use. As you know, so many were mixed status families with children being US born sometimes, or the family members, or even a spouse being citizens or permanent resident. But as you have heard here, but the head of the household with insecure status. Just that one person made the whole family ineligible for getting pandemic relief. In addition to food, we also gave hundreds of thousands of dollars in small cash grants to families for essential needs, which readily told us why they need those funds. They must need funds for buying essentials, even life-saving prescription, $20 for copay for prescription, asthma medicine, paying the overdue bill for their cell phone, the lifeline to the internet, job hunting, and family support. Some of them told us keeping the light or the heat from being turned off at home due to unpaid utility bills. Making partial payment on overdue rent to keep the landlords off their backs and from evicting them in spite of eviction, ban. So we heard from members of our community over and over again. And when we asked about the EITC and paying taxes, many of them felt that it's such an unjust system because they feel like they're paying not just the fair taxes share, but they also, in most cases, they are paying the employer's part of taxes as well. When we think about FICA, they're paying their share and the employer's share. What the EITC bill is asking for is not a handout, but a recognition of many years of hard work for tax-paying immigrant families that have contributed to the growth and prosperity of the Massachusetts and its economy. They have contributed so much, and the payroll taxes, they will never be able to collect on. And also they do a great deal to sustain social security system for everyone else, right? That most of the time we don't stop to think about. In addition, they pay taxes, income taxes through the EITC, and they also sales tax, property tax, excise tax, and so on. When we think about Massachusetts passing this bill, they need to think about this as not just really we're doing something for immigrants, but we're doing something for the state of Massachusetts, for residents. We're talking about families and children, people who are part of the fabric of this society, who are paying the dues. And all you're doing is creating a system that is fairness and is inclusive. So it's about bringing equity to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, Annalicia. Let's zoom back out a little bit to the policy landscape. This is for Margalit or Phineas. It was mentioned earlier that there was a Mass Inc. poll that showed pretty widespread support for this this type of issue, this type of policy. Are there any drawbacks to this? Is it too costly? What are the drawbacks or the counter arguments that you've heard?
Either one of us, if you want to go first, Phineas, that's fine. Oh, well, I'll just say, so, we do, the poll showing the support was great. I think something at Miro, we work, our priority legislation is the Safe Communities Act, which is been filed over a number of years. And that's really, to end decades of state and local involvement in deportations that impede access to court and police protection. And then in this past year, we saw how it also undermines COVID testing and then treatment and even vaccine accessibility. And then we also work on the Work and Family Mobility Act, which is also known as the Driving Families Forward campaign, which would be extending eligibility for Massachusetts standard driver's license to anyone who's qualified to get that. And both of these have been filed, Safe Communities in different forms over the last few sessions. And we had done a number of polls, and we're heartened right now because we think the narrative for even those is changing. Certainly, in a weird way, COVID, I think, has helped uncover, both just the very, deep and real system inequities, as well as, appreciation for all of our workers, but especially essential workers who are, tend to be, our immigrant workers. And so we're really happy that, both these pieces of legislation, they've both advanced out of their respective committees, which is the farthest they've ever made it. So we do kind of take from other things that this narrative, could be changing. And, even in doing this budget, for the budget advocacy for emergency cash, we couched it as, impacted populations of, LEP and to gateway cities. And of course, these really were targeting, an undocumented population, but, we were just wanting to, be careful how we said that. And yet, so we do think in some ways that there's a little bit more realization of, exactly who is working. I think COVID really showed us a little bit more personal of these natures, and also just, how much it's, we were able to frame safe communities as really as a public health, imperative, that getting people tested and access to treatment keeps all of us safe. And, I think we have started to understand the impacts of, even just a few $100s here and there, and how that can help our communities, small businesses, things like that. So in a way, a little bit of a silver lining there. I think there's, I think we've kind of always measured things up against, there's been so much resistance to safe communities, but then seeing it this year kind of in this whole new light. And so something, like the earned income tax credit, I think I would like to say that it's kind of an understanding of how our communities, we need each other. We need each other to work together. Certainly, someone needs childcare for their child, that's going to benefit maybe, a small business of its own, of a childcare center. So I remain hopeful in terms of drawbacks. I think it's just any of arguments about, who deserves money, how much we give. But I think in presenting good data, and I think with, as Marilyn said, educating folks, and I think that will really be key, just to educate around this subject matter. It will really be the key to getting that acceptance.
I would follow just that I don't think there really are drawbacks to extending it. That the expense is not particularly great compared to the benefits and how meaningful those benefits are. I mean, I think there's ways that the EITC can be made a more effective tool. So things like support for the great volunteer income tax assistance sites around the site, which have begun to get some state support. They're going to have to play a bigger and bigger role, and to support the various kind of low-income tax clinics. Their role becomes more important in this post-COVID place, especially with getting these federal benefits. So those things which can make the EITC more meaningful will make this also more meaningful. I noticed also just in the chat, there was a question about what other kinds of federal benefits are denied to ITIN holders. For unemployment benefits, it was estimated that there's been about $300 million worth of unemployment deposit contributions by workers that they're not then have any way to address, because to get that money if they do become unemployed, because you have to have work status both when you were working and when you'd be applying for that. And then the $1,400 checks were not originally eligible. The subsequent checks were a little less harshly punitive, because someone else can correct me on this, but I believe what it was is the latter stimulus checks at least corrected not penalizing the entire family in mixed status. It just didn't give credit for the ITIN filer in that family. So it's only slightly more harsh and less harsh in its exclusion, but there's a whole bunch of ways that ITIN filers have not been getting the same amount that other people working and filing their taxes are.
That's a great point, Phineas, and I think it speaks to what Luz and Alicia were saying earlier about the kind of patchwork of assistance that organizations like theirs and others have had to rely on in lack of a real systemic social infrastructure for I-10 holders and immigrant households. I'm going to jump a little bit more into the weeds on the policy issues, and then we'll turn to the audience Q&A. There was some mention of, support for this in the legislature and bills. And Phineas, you mentioned, and others mentioned, the Healthy Families EITC Coalition. So I'll share very quickly how the coalition is really trying to seize on this opportunity to transform the EITC in Massachusetts. So there is a number of bills that have been filed in the legislature, both in the House and Senate. And the bill that the coalition is in support of is really trying to do 5 major transformations to the EITC. Number 1, to increase the match rate from 30 to 50% of the federal credit, fully refundable. No offense to Cali and Massachusetts, but we're hoping to become the highest state EITC in the nation and surpass Maryland. But you certainly set the bar. Number 2, and this is where it really transforms the EITC, is to establish a minimum or base credit of $2,400 to households earning up to $50,000 in income. So in many cases, this would actually be more than 50% of the federal credit for certain households. For others, it wouldn't quite be up to 50%. But creating that floor, that income floor, is what would essentially turn this into what you would maybe call a guaranteed minimum income. And so as we're thinking about this in the sense of a guaranteed minimum income, we would also in this bill propose extending that credit to families who are earning up to $75,000. So you're earning that minimum $2,400 credit up until you reach $50,000 in income for your household, and then that begins to phase out as the EITC does, and it'll phase out to those earning up to 75, which is much higher than it currently is structured. Really, the focus of today's discussion is expanding the eligibility for the credit to excluded groups of people, including I-10 filers. It would also expand the eligibility for this credit to unpaid caregivers. These are, individuals, households that are caring for children under the age of 6, who are caring for disabled family members or elderly family members who aren't in the workforce, but are certainly contributing a great deal to society and would benefit, and their families would benefit from a guaranteed minimum income credit. It would also expand eligibility to low-income college students who are entering into the workforce, not dependent upon their caregiver or parent. And similar to what was passed in the American Rescue Package recently, expanding the credit to younger workers under 25 and older workers over the age of 65. Lastly, this bill would improve access to the credit through a communications and outreach campaign led by the Department of Revenue, and change the way that the credit is dispersed so that more frequent payments across the course of the year can help with family budgeting rather than just a one-time payment at tax time. So this is a bill that is in the legislature, and we anticipate a hearing on this bill in the Revenue Committee at some point, either in the summer or fall. But we'll turn now, and if folks have questions about that and what I just shared, please, and what all the panelists have shared, please put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to them. We'll continue to dive into the weeds of these policies, and I'll sort of turn back to Callie. There was a question, sort of a technical question about the children in I-10 filing households. Do they need a social security number to sort of factor into the calculation of what the EITC amount is?
No, the children do not need a social security number to factor into that. So whether the children have I-10s or social security numbers, with the mixed status household, they would be eligible to receive the state credit that they would receive otherwise.
Great, thank you. We have some other questions for Massachusetts panelists. So who is championing this in the legislature? Well, there are a number of champions. There's House Representative Marjorie Decker and Andy Vargas, who have filed a bill. In the Senate, Senator Jamie Eldridge and Senator Sal DiDomenico have also filed bills. And there are a number of other legislators who have filed related EITC bills in support of this. So there is, you know, a history in Massachusetts, and certainly the Healthy Families EITC Coalition has for a number of years now advocated for increasing the EITC, increasing access, especially for I-10 holders. But this new transformative GMI bill is certainly new. This is a question for all the panelists. I'd love to hear from whoever would like to tackle this one. It's from Betsy. How do I convince my legislators that this is not socialism? That's what senators in Florida have used to describe this type of policy.
I'll take a chance. So I think when folks understand how our tax system works, they would realize that this is hardly socialism. We have a system where all of us are required to pay a certain amount of money based on the amount of money that we earned or that we inherit, etc. And usually the tax is based on that, on how much income, not necessarily on who you are. And here what we have is a situation where many families and their children simply don't have a certain number, the Social Security number. And that's what's keeping them from earning that, because they have done everything else right. They have earned the income and they have paid the correct tax. Here in Massachusetts, we have regressive taxes. We have our sales tax is progressive. It's the same amount for everybody. And the income tax is also regressive, it's 5% regardless. And I think what some folks don't understand too is that it's not just citizens who are forced to pay a certain amount of tax. Residents pay the same tax. In fact, many people avoid to become residents to avoid being subjected to tax in the United States. And to become a resident, all you have to do is be here for 6 months out of the year. Be physically present within the United States for 6 months out of the year. Bingo, you have become a resident and therefore subject to the same tax as any citizen. So that's very, very far from socialism.
Great. Anyone want to add to that, or?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Natalicia.
I think another piece of it too, you know, thank you, Luz, for explaining, the process, right? That it's there on the paper. But I think there's the human aspect of it as well, is getting to know people, understand the contributions that they make, understand that they are your neighbor, they clean your home, they take care of the city, they take care of different aspects of the part of the whole that makes the city, the state functions, and that they're making huge contribution. I find that a lot of people who are anti-immigrant that do not support efforts, it's because of lack of understanding and lack of information and afraid of the unknown, right? They holding those theories in their head that is not aligned with the reality of the people who are here, of what they are doing, and think they're living under the rock, but it's not true. Their kids go to your kids' school as well. They go to church with you. They live in your neighborhood, and they work extremely hard in doing the best to support this country, to do the best they possibly can, given the lack of opportunity for them to change the immigration status that is not within their reach. And many of them are undocumented because of very complex system, not because, of what people sometimes think, right? I think it's getting to know the people. It's really real people, real families, working 2-3 jobs I think that goes a long way to really sort of humanizing the families and the issues. I think you really can change a lot of hearts and a lot of minds along the way. So.
Thank you, Natalicia. I think you really hit the nail right on the head. I wish that we could keep this conversation going, but we do have to end at 1. So I want to turn things back over to Serlin Kantav from Children's HealthWatch to share some parting remarks and some information with folks.
Great, thank you, Rich. Definitely, I want people to leave this webinar with a call to action, and I would say, reach out to your legislators and ask them to support EITC and other, cash benefits for ITIN holders. They're contributing, as Natalicia said very eloquently, that they're contributing immensely to our economy, but they're not benefiting from all the things that they could be benefiting from because of lack of access. So, which is, due to unfair and dated laws. So definitely reach out to your representatives and ask them to support this for our the many hardworking immigrant families that are contributing to our economy and to our society. I want to thank all of you again for joining us today. We so appreciate your time and your participation. And speaking of participation, I want to thank again our wonderful speakers, our own Richard Sheward from Children's HealthWatch, Phineas Baxendall from the Mass Budget and Policy Center, Kelly Shumitz from the Maryland Center on Economic Policy, Margalit Tepper of the Mass Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, Luz Aravella of the Greater Boston Legal Services, and Natalicia Tracy of the Brazilian Worker Center. Of course, we also want to thank again Marilyn Meyerhoff and Sam Feldman for their support and sponsorship of the Equity Can't Wait series, a year-long series. And we have many more exciting town halls and events coming up, including our annual fall event honoring our Children's HealthWatch champions. So stay tuned. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.